Hi, I'm Jack Baruzzini, and you're listening to The Secrets of Stargate, where we talk about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. And joining me today are Jeff Haecker. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Jack.
And Lisa Jones. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Jack.
And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hi, Jack.
Today we are discussing the 5th episode of Season 9 of SG1, The Powers That Be. But before we get into that, I think I need to do a wardrobe change. I need to put on my evil, sexy, fake god costume, and then we'll be good to go.
Oh, was today sexy fake god costumes?
Yes.
Oh man, I totally missed the Slack message on that. Hold on. Dang it. Here we go. I got some gold foil here. There we are.
Beautiful. Very, very regal. Do you have your voice changer built in?
I do not.
When Vala learns that a prior of the Ori has visited a planet where she was once worshipped as a god, she convinces SG1 to go with her to help the villagers resist the Ori's influence. This goes about as well as you can imagine. The plan backfires when the villagers discover that her true identity is a false god and imprison her. A plague is sent by the Ori, which further complicates the situation, and despite their efforts, SG1 is unable to stop the prior from converting the villagers to Origin. Never going to stop thinking about the game client whenever I hear that.
Yeah.
Vala's desperate attempt to kill the prior fails because he has Neo powers. Proving his power and solidifying the villagers' faith in the Ori, Prior ultimately heals the entire village, including Mitchell, and then leaves. That's about what happens in this episode. What were your thoughts on this episode, Jeff?
Yeah, I like this one. You get a little bit more insight into Vala, and you kind of start to see her turn from being kind of her selfish self into, you get that nice scene where she's trying to heal everybody and she can't keep up anymore because it's the Ori virus that we'll come to see again, that she can't keep up with it. And so you actually get to see her start to feel remorse and maybe start to become a better person. And you get a little bit more of her backstory, and yeah, I think it's an interesting moral one, because you have, what do you do in the face of this kind of a threat? Like you're going to die or convert to this religion, and these people ultimately choose to convert. And there's also the nice little subplot of Lamb and Landry. You kind of get more of their relationship, and kind of start to build that a little bit. And so yeah, I like this episode.
What about you, Lisa?
Well, Jeff said a lot of what I was going to say. Yeah. I actually really liked it, and this episode has me rethinking my dislike of Vala a lot, just because we've talked so much about her backstory and about what was true and what isn't, and what we know and what we don't. And what this episode proved is that she was telling the truth about being the host to a symbiote, and I liked the playfulness in which they wrote her in this without being over the top, right? They kept it kind of fun, but they didn't go crazy. And we really learned that she did what she had to survive and to make her way after the symbiote was removed from her. I can't decide how much I like Lamb and Landry and their relationship. I know this was the episode where they revealed that he was her father, right? But I don't know I don't know what the point of it is yet. So she feels very kind of over the top angry with him, and I don't remember why they're at odds. Sort of do, but I don't know. It's like they're trying to build a story out of something that, like, to make something interesting on base. So I'm kind of putting a pin in that one for a minute, but overall, I like the way that the team worked together. I have a real issue with how this episode ended, and the threat of the Ori, which we can talk about later. But overall, I liked it. I actually watched it twice voluntarily. So
nice.
Yeah. Look at me on season 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
No prior was behind you threatening you with a virus, saying you had to watch it again.
No.
Hello to all the repeat watchers.
That's right.
What about you, Victor?
Yeah, I like this one too. It's another episode of Space Court. That's right, it's Court in Space. But yeah, this episode has kind of an interesting history too. I mean, I do like whenever Vala gets knocked down a peg and kind of put in her space and has to like deal with the consequences of her action. But when they found out that season 9 was going to be renewed, it was kind of like all hands on deck. We need all of our writers now. And so Martin Garrow, who had been writing for Atlantis, was called in and, came up with the story idea. But this was written before Origin was, so they still didn't know who the Ori were. And so he wrote the episode, and then Robert C. Cooper came in and wrote the whole scene with the prior and basically the court scene and stuff once they had kind of fleshed out a little bit more who the Ori is. I do like that, we can talk about this, we get a little bit more insight into what the Ori's motives are. Daniel says, like, I don't know why they're doing this. And it takes another 2 seasons in a movie for us to figure out exactly why. But, and I also I do like the ending. I like that it ends on a down note. I like that SG1 is completely put on the back foot and bewildered, and that they lost this one and that they'll probably lose a few. Now, I don't like that they keep losing as much as they do, if I remember correctly, in season 9 and 10. I think you only really need one story where your heroes kind of get knocked down a peg and then you can start building them back up. But this episode in isolation, I do like.
Yeah, the ending was about the only thing I liked about this episode, to be honest. I like that it showed, like, because of Vala's actions, it kind of completely backfired on them. Like, their whole reason for her revealing that she was the host was so that these people wouldn't worship false gods, but then that ends up completely backfiring because basically she's completely like messed up the planet. I like that. I got to admit, I was happy when they said they were gonna either put her in prison or put her to death. I was like, yes, do it.
You're like, maybe they were wrong and she really is going away.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's not been a huge fan of season 9 so far, but I'm trying to keep an open mind. Trying to view it separately from SG1. I also feel like, maybe this is just because it's his first few episodes, Cameron Mitchell just feels like discount version of Jack O'Neill to me so far. And I hope that he kind of comes into his own and differentiates himself a bit, but that's just the vibe I've been getting from him. So wasn't a huge fan of this episode overall.
Yeah, on Cameron Mitchell, I don't know if you were on for the episode, but on one of the commentary tracks in the first, when they introduced it, his character was supposed to be kind of like the ultimate SG1 fanboy.
Yeah.
Who's just like very excited to be there. And he's still kind of in that mode. He doesn't have much to do in this episode except to get sick. And even when he gets sick, it's really hard to tell that it's him. Mm-hmm. Like, they cut to somebody who's sick, and like, and if it weren't for the dog tags, you're like, oh, that must be a member of an SG team who's sick. And it's like, oh, is that supposed to be because the way they shot him and his hair looks weird. Mm-hmm. And then when he does recover and Lamb's standing over him, he says he feels tingly. And that means nothing because they've cut out all the scenes to this point that establish that he and Lamb are like flirting and have a relationship, And so I don't know. It's weird. There's some stuff that's weird in this episode.
Yeah, and it is. I know that they kind of highlighted this in the first episode where Vala says that there's a very limited gene pool on Earth. But if I like look down, like if I'm checking my phone or whatever while I watch the episode, I keep getting him and Daniel Jackson confused because they just look so similar if you just glance at them.
They do have a fix for that in later episodes. They start to dress them in different color uniforms.
Okay.
Yeah, the beard and the glasses
intentionally, yeah.
But
yeah,
he's not all.
Yeah,
Jackson's not always wearing the glasses anymore. So,
and I think the beard is going away, right?
Yeah, they actually intended to film another scene that would have explained I forget what, but by that point, Michael Shanks had shaved his beard, and they couldn't film it.
Oh, I read it was the entrance scene where.
Oh, okay.
Cameron and Vala are eating Jell-O. That was originally supposed to be Daniel and Vala in his lab, but Michael Shanks had shaved his beard, and so they had to. Of course, I like that they brought in the Jell-O because that's been kind of an SG1 staple, even though it's supposed to be Sam and Jack, whatever. But we'll go with Cameron and Vala eating Jell-O.
I like that he took the Jell-O with him when when Vala runs off to tell him about the planet.
Yeah.
And it's red Jell-O because I think Martin Wood has the claim on blue Jell-O.
Yes.
So William Waring in this episode had used the red Jell-O in deference to Martin Wood.
I like it. Yeah,
like
because
this
I told you there's a whole
lore.
thing on what colors mean for Jell-O, but I'm not quite that much of a. I have not dived that deep into it.
And we had Jell-O in last week's episode too with Ronan and
That's right.
Yeah, it was green.
and Shepard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Peter DeLuise is green Jell-O.
This makes me want to get like a Jello mold for the Stargate.
Oh yeah, make some Jell-O jigglers.
Yeah. You've got that 3D
Yeah.
printer. One of y'all does. You need to get cracking.
You can
yeah,
repurpose it for spam too.
That's right. Yeah, still got to make my
Exactly.
spam gate.
I had some spam yesterday, and I was looking at the ingredients, and it is less processed than about 90% of the food. It's only like 4, maybe 5 ingredients in
Wow.
it. It's like pork, salt, water, and like cornstarch. So, I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for listening. I mean, I think spam needs to be a big part of the Maha movement here.
Don't take away my spam and don't take away my zero sugar dark
Yeah.
pepper. And I'll be okay.
I think I'm gonna like seasons 9 and 10 more. Like that's gonna happen faster than I'm gonna grow to like spam. Sorry.
I don't know. I'm a fan of any food that cooks in the can it's sealed in. You got to appreciate that.
I mean, technically, any food that's in a can, you can cook it in. I don't know how
That's
well it's gonna
true,
come
but
out,
but they've done all the heavy lifting for you before it even leaves the spam factory.
it's true. Spam walked, so Lunchables
Yeah.
run.
We should probably talk about how great Greg Anderson is in this episode as the Ori prior here. He was the village magistrate. I think they should have done more. I think he should have been like, "Oh, I know you two. You two were in different bodies, but the Ori, I know who you are." I think he should have done more, like calling them out on that because he's met them and like burned them alive twice, almost twice at this point. But he is just such a really good, like creepy prior. He has like the tone down, everything down. He has the look down, and he can do this thing with his lips where he like makes them like stick out like this or something when he talks, and it's like really creepy and effective. I like him a lot as prior. I think we see him like 2 more times, but he's definitely my favorite.
I like the way he calls Daniel Jackson Jackson. He actually uses his name, which you don't see a lot on these shows, which I like.
And
I feel like.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like that whenever people talk about Daniel Jackson, they always use his full name though, like more than any other character.
Yeah. He's kind of like Chaka Khan that way. You have to say Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone who's not really from Earth. I mean, Vala calls him Daniel, but Teal'c always says Daniel Jackson, and I feel like all the other non-Earthlings will often say Daniel Jackson as well. Cameron just says Jackson usually. I think.
And Teal'c's here. Yeah.
Last episode he was headed to Dakara, and all of a sudden he's back. Yeah, I guess that didn't work out.
His hair's growing in too, which looks kind of cool. But yeah, he gets to play War, the card game, with Colonel Mitchell when Vala's imprisoned. And on the commentary track, they said, the actors hate when they're in a scene, but they don't have any lines. And so they were just kind of sitting around. And I guess Michael Shanks had brought some cards or something and said, "Why don't you guys like play War in the foreground?" And it's this really nice scene where they're just like killing time playing like War because that's the only card game that they know. As they kind of push through them when Vala is in chains. Apparently, Claudia Black is like so skinny and lithe though that she could have fit through the bars very easily. So that scene where she looks like she's trying to fit through them, she could have just basically like walked through them at that point. So
I was wondering, is that the same set from when Teal'c was on his trial? I forgot what that was called. What his trial was called. Remember that one?
I forget the name of the episode.
Yeah.
For his war crimes.
I don't think it's the same set.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying how to name that for some reason makes me think was it Korai?
Yeah, Korai. The Korai.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Korai.
Yeah. The first space or one of the first Space Court episodes. Not the same set, but the set they use for the throne room, the prison, and then the courtroom scene that looks like it's outside. That's all the same set, just lit and furnished differently. So Yeah,
Oh,
this whole
cool.
episode takes place in basically 2 locations. That one set that could be the throne room, prison room, or courtroom, and then what's left of the sand dunes in Vancouver, which, as we've discussed before, all the sand has kind of been like grabbed up to turn into cement. So they're like shooting in basically a tiny corner of the sand dunes that has like a wall of sand behind it. And so they have to get very, like whenever they go for coverage, do a long shot, they have to be very careful. And they were more careful this time not to show any trees or cement factories or trucks in the background.
I liked the jail scene and all of that, talking about they were going to put her on trial, because it reminded me so much of early SG1 with Teal going for his Korai. I thought that was nice that he had to go through it, and now here she is having to go through it a little differently.
And I like how
she has to go through the Maldoran. That's what they call it.
Yeah.
That was a Robert C. Cooper idea to call it the Maldoran, that she named her
her
trial after her, And I do like those scenes very much. I like the village elder, who is played by Cam Chai, I think is Ozdak the village elder. Vakna is the sick guy, right? So yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, Cam Chai, who plays the village elder, and how quickly he turns from like, "Oh, you're back. We're so grateful you're here," and then quickly turns to like, "You totally betrayed us, and now we're going to put you to death, and now we're going to keep you in prison for life, and now we're going to confiscate all your stuff." And I really like the courtroom scene where they're hearing arguments, and he comes out with like a list of 7 charges. Because the story is that Vala was possessed by the Gould Katesh, who is the Egyptian goddess of beauty, apparently, or one of them. But by the time she came to this planet, or came back to this planet, Katesh had been removed by the Tok'ra, and she was just using it basically as a base of operations for her wacky larceny. And so she's put on trial, and they start to list these charges, and it's whole scale murder and everything. And Daniel says, no, wait, this is just Vala. This isn't the Gould. We need to just do whatever she's accused of. And so there's a list of 7 charges, and it only takes 3 off. There's still 4 left. Forced planetary wide labor.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought it was funny how quickly he accepted that argument that, like, oh, I'm going to take your word for it, even though you're on her side.
I'm glad they didn't relitigate. Yeah. The whole Skara Cortel.
And that's like with any lawyer who's any lawyer who knows they got you, they're like, oh, okay, we can disregard those charges, but because they know they got you on these other charges.
Yeah.
I was really glad they skipped her telling them, the whole Katesh symbiote issue. I was glad they skipped so much of that. And the court, because like you said, we've done Space Court a few times. They just showed us pertinent points to move the story forward and the characters forward. So I was very appreciative of that, because there was so much else to cover here.
Yeah, and the matter's never settled because the prior shows up and kind of crashes their Space Court, and is, much of a downer as the ending is. I think, the planet would have converted to Origin anyways once they would have used the plague. And
well, they did finish Space Court, in that they decided that she was going to be in prison for life.
Yeah.
Right.
And then because of the plague, they let her out.
Yep.
So.
Because her whole thing is she attempts to heal them using the Gould healing device to kind of get back in their good graces, but that doesn't work. And I did like that scene, like, for her character. Like, seems like she's trying to turn things around.
Yeah, especially when she says goodbye when Azdak dies. And she says, like, can I have a moment with them? And you just, and I guess that's what I liked about this episode for Vala, is that it wasn't just, not everything was like a vulgar sex joke, over the top craziness. I mean, you got to see some real humanity in her, and so it makes it easier to accept all the crazy that she does. So because, she really, even when she comes back and she changes clothes and they're putting on the play for her, and, all of this stuff, it's like, she's like, well, this is what I had to do to survive, and this and that. Like, I treated them fine. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't, she's like, I didn't do all those things. And then she does try to heal
forced
them.
mining of Nakoda, though.
Well, they were already doing that. Yeah. and then trying to heal them. And you can see it, just the toll it's taking on her to use the device. And then the fact that it's not working. And then when she realizes she can't save them. And so I like that. I like that they gave us that introspection, because we're not going to see it very often. We're going to go back to over the top Vala pretty soon.
Yeah.
Well, I think at least to me, it makes sense for her character, because she's in this position of being, she was, how she kind of had a pretty rough upbringing with, as we'll see in more episodes, and kind of a pretty chaotic life. And then she got taken by the Gould. And so she hasn't really known, like Daniel Jackson's probably like the best person, or, the Tauri are probably the best people that she's ever met, like that actually try to help her, and show her a good example to be. So I kind of take it as like she hasn't, really been around good people before, and she's kind of learning, and it takes a while, and as we'll see in some upcoming episodes, she goes somewhere else for a little bit and learns, kind of to be good in some ways too. So but I did like, I've liked her character, just because like at least for me, I can understand where she came from and why she's kind of the way she is, but you see her kind of morally improve. So it could be easier just to keep her, that same way, but they actually like progress her character.
I guess my biggest issue with Vala, and I think we've actually probably talked about this before, but just because with Sam Carter, like Stargate has never gone for the like eye candy female characters that don't really seem to bring anything else to it, and that's kind of what Vala feels like at this point. So I'm just missing Sam, and I'm looking forward to her being back
next week.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Oh, awesome.
Yay!
Speaking of eye candy, the dress, her Katesh dress that she wore, that was actually going to be the dress she wore in Avalon Part 1 when she steps through the gate. And I think somebody on the staff said, no, that's too much for the introduction of this character. Instead, they dressed her up like Catwoman, which I don't know if that's like any better.
This one was
it's tasteful.
I'm going to call it more modest. Yeah. Even though she's missing the middle part, like it's a little more modest than the black leather bustier thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is gold though, so it's blingy.
Yeah, it's blingy. It's nice, and she has lots of gold stashed there, which unfortunately I don't think she gets to keep. But
yeah,
it wasn't really hers, so I can't feel too bad about that.
And I actually like the Vala Daniel banter in this, and there are some like 80s sitcom jokes where Daniel's like, just confess, you'll feel so good afterwards, and then she's like in prison, and she's like, is this the part where I feel good afterwards? And it's just like that whole 80s like, I'm not gonna do it, cut to I'm doing it, type humor. But it works on me. I like it.
I liked it too. It was nice.
There's also the component of if Daniel and Vala have to remain close by each other because the whatever they were called, the bracelets. So like if she's in prison there, he's going to have to stay until that connection is broken. So I think he's like, we need to get her out so we can go home and get out of here. And if she dies, we don't know what would happen. Like if their connection is still pretty strong, that was something they were like, we don't know what would happen if one of them dies, if how it affects the other one.
Not yet.
I assume that's a plot that we're gonna just kind of string out, and then eventually will get resolved, or is it just gonna
has to be in the next couple episodes here, right? So
it's about. I think it's the mid-season break. If I'm remembering correctly, I think it's the mid-season break that this happened. And I think this was 5, so we've got in 5 more. It'll be. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, now I want to talk about why I hate the end.
Okay, why do you hate the end?
Yes, yeah.
I hate it because what we've seen so far, the way they've established the Ori as the new bad guys, is there's no way to fight them. It's just, I hate to say it seems impossible, but I feel like they've created this monster of a bad, as an opponent that, you can't shoot him at all. I mean, you saw the little bullets, the what do you call it, the Neo effect, just to stop
the not so
from the Matrix,
not so little bullets, because they're the P90 shoots like 5.7 millimeter rounds, and they said they were too small, so we used bigger bullets, which don't come out of a P90. So
yeah. So you can't shoot them. You try to reason with people, and like you said, there's a real moral quandary here, because these people, I forgot his name. already, the leader of the people.
Aztec.
He says we're starving. We're hopeless. We don't know how to survive. What he's saying is pretty, it really influences them. And how do you combat that? And then the plague happens. He healed the one, and then the plague happens, and they all start dying. And then he heals them, and they come back to life.
Yep.
And you see what I'm saying? Like, I didn't like it because it just, like you said, Victor, it sets up that they're just going to keep losing. And there's a lot of them losing against the Ori for the next 2 seasons. I mean, it's just, I don't know how it works. And I guess that's how I feel about it. You're watching it and you're like, huh.
It's like
I don't know.
Late season 2 of Buffy, when Angel becomes Angelus and then is trying to take away everything that Buffy holds dear, and it's like horrible. But at least that's only like 2 or 3 episodes. And then, you have the final showdown and stuff. And here, you're right. There is no final showdown for another 2 seasons in a movie. And
Yep. Yeah. And our only break from it is when they do little side stories.
Yeah.
Like we had the other week, with the ties that bind and all that. We have these little side stories with the Lucian Alliance and stuff. But no, otherwise it's pretty darn depressing.
I think it has, I liked the ending from the point of view of Vala's character causing all these problems and it not getting resolved. This is basically her fault, and because of that, there are consequences. I like that. But I think my biggest problem with the Ori so far is that they kind of have that Marvel movie problem of you just have to keep building up your enemies to make them more and more overpowered. These are basically, the way they operate is not really that different from the Goa'uld, except they seem to be more ill-defined in what their actual power set is and what their goals are and all that. And so they just seem to be nebulous, overpowered enemy. And they're not, I don't find them that interesting from that point of view. I would rather cooler direction they could have gone is, all right, there's a huge power vacuum created because the Goa'uld are gone. What's going on with all the other planets and all the other people? And a whole 2 seasons devoted to dealing with the Lucian Alliance or replicators or the remaining Goa'uld. I feel like that would have been more interesting than another evil big space bad guy.
We kind of solve that eventually with there's a character that comes in that kind of becomes the face of the Ori and becomes a little bit more a little bit more of an interesting thing there, and you actually have someone they can fight against. So that is coming.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember.
It might be the end of the season or beginning of next, but
don't tell me because I have no memory of who or what that is. So it'll be a surprise for me when I watch it again.
I'm scrolling. I'm looking.
Yeah.
It's next season.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I think I want to say it's the beginning of 10 that kind of starts. But
10.
I mean, even when Babylon 5 wrapped up a season early at the end of season 4 and they had to scramble to come up with a season 5, they still kept it kind of interesting in the, here's the fallout of the Shadow War and here's the new players and in the galaxy and stuff. And I think they would have benefited more from that approach. But I think at this point they're still just scrambling, trying to figure out the writers are who the Ori are, what's going on, how are we going to get enough scripts to fill the first half a season of this show that's been, renewed at the last minute, while still, Atlantis is the new darling and is airing on the premium networks in Canada and the UK and stuff. So
yeah. And I guess that's part of it. They haven't really fleshed out who the Ori are. Why do they care so much about everyone worshiping them? And if you don't worship them, they kill you. And why? Well, no. I mean, if you've watched it all, but you can tell there's just, how are they going to beat them if they're so powerful and they're so knowing and they can kill everyone with the plague and then blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's what are you doing?
The way they do ultimately beat them, I remember not being completely satisfying either, but yeah.
Did it dance off?
Yeah.
If only.
Yeah, if only. I think the word MacGuffin comes to mind, but yeah, so it's, I will say that Robert C. Cooper has has kind of like dialed in the Ori speak a little bit better in this episode. They're not like complete caricatures of, Anglican preachers or whatever. There's a little bit more substance to the debate here. Not terribly much more, but it was a lot more interesting and I think better written, the kind of debate that Daniel Jackson has. And it is kind of, he even admits that, he didn't do very well against the prior because he's completely in an uncharted territory here.
He's also trying to defend Vala, which doesn't really put him on the any sort of upper foot.
No. Well, I will say that I agree that Martin Guerra wrote this one, right? It was his first one for SG1 after writing for Atlantis.
Yeah, he came up with the story and I think wrote some of the good lines and stuff. I think the main staff writers kind of took it
all pitched
at a certain point. Yeah.
Well, I thought it was well constructed and I really liked the way the characters interacted with each other. I did think the Ori were written better. So on that whole, my problem isn't really with the episode. It's just the whole Ori.
Yeah.
The entire framework that the season is being built around is faulty. And so even the good episodes are kind of pulled down by that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kind of how I felt about seasons 5, 6, and 7 of Buffy. I didn't think the enemies in those were very good. So
they could have just gone with a Stargate sitcom. What's going on with Walter?
Have the other guy.
We haven't seen Walter
in this episode.
He was in this episode for a scene, I think. He shows up. He shows up next to General Landry or something at some point. I don't know. I seem to remember him being in it.
So what y'all think about the Dr. Landry thing?
I like the scene where she's like about to go off planet and she's trying to like talk him out. She's trying to, argue with him. Like, I'm the most qualified. I need to go, da da da. And he's like, I know. I'm just telling you to be careful. And I like that. He's trying. It's kind of that first step in kind of mending that relationship, which we'll get hints of here and there. I think it's not too big of a subplot from what I remember. There's a couple. I don't even know if there's a full episode devoted to it. I think there might just be like sprinkled here and there, but I did like that scene.
I'm just very glad that they're not like exes because I felt like that's the direction it was going in and it was really weird.
I felt like they were trying to make us think that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, this is gross.
Here's a car. Have some car keys.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was, keys to the apartment or whatever it was. But no, and yeah, I mean, Lexa Doig, I think, played it very hostile, and I don't know that it needed to be played that hostile. Granted, you have some resentment about your father being a military guy and not being around, and yes, he's trying to reach out to you. He's not trying to buy you off or, erase the past. But so, I don't know. I'm glad that he still didn't give her a hazmat suit helmet that fit, though. Anytime you see her walking on the planet, she's holding the helmet out with her hands because they kept falling off.
I just kept thinking there at lunch, and I kept thinking, he is your boss. Like, you have unresolved issues. You took the job. He's the general. He's your boss. Like, put a pin in it and deal with these things on, outside the base.
Yeah. Not very professional.
No.
It's that soap operification of television where I feel like every show needs to bring in personal problems. And like, if you're in the military, you probably would have, first of all, she's a doctor and she's in the military. So I feel like she would have had enough like self-control and maturity to not act the way she acts. But
yeah. Well, I mean, it is what it is.
I just think they contrived something to make them interesting, something to give them, a subplot, a B plot, Yeah.
I do like the scene at the end when she revives Colonel Mitchell and then the other doctor walks in and like can't speak. And so he has to look kind of antsy in the background for a little bit. And then finally he gets to see like, come quickly, come see. And they run out and, Azdak's still like dead on the thing. And then as soon as Dr. Lamb appears, he's like, he sits up and everybody's like, he's saved. It's like, like, wow, he waited until she showed up. It's nice.
Yeah.
But,
some Monty Python comedic timing right there.
So do you think they were intentionally trying to do a Lazarus, Jesus, thing here?
I think everything with the Ori is very surface level, bad pastiche of like Christian imagery, and so it just felt like that. Like nothing, all of it feels very surface level. Like if you're going to do a critique of religion, there are much more interesting ways to do it than this.
Yeah, I think this is just back up against the wall, come up with vaguely religious mumbo jumbo to have your characters spout, and I don't know. It just
you were healed.
Yeah. But I didn't count the number of villagers because who, when they all bow down around the prior and they look kind of like a Stargate, I didn't count to see if there were like 38 of them around there. I don't think it was quite that many. I think it was probably closer to 18
one for each
or 20.
symbol.
But yeah, that would have been cool if they had done that. But I didn't bother to pause it and count because.
So did we have any fun alternate language titles for this episode?
We did. In the UK, this was known as The Gods Must Be Crazy. No, I'm kidding. But it's weird because the powers that be is a, English idiom. And so in the other languages, we actually got more literal titles out of the other languages. Like in Italian, we got La Mancia degli Ori, which is the Ori threat. In French, we got proselytisme, which is proselytizing, which is what the Ori does in this episode. And then in Japanese, we got kaseke no chikara, which means miraculous power.
Oh.
Interesting.
Yeah,
it's funny how different all those are.
Yeah, it was interesting from a foreign language title perspective this time.
Yeah. Awesome. Did y'all have any other thoughts on this episode?
I don't think so.
We do have some feedback on our episode runner. Varyar77 says, "Alas, poor Ford. I liked his enthusiasm about gate travel, etc., and wish they could have done more with him. He gets a resolution in the SGA Season 6 novels, but Ronan is far more interesting and charismatic. This is when the show really became interesting to me when I watched it through the first time a couple of years ago." And I definitely agree. I feel like Season 2 has really been picking up.
Yeah, and due to a YouTube issue, Varyar77 is actually Paul Leone, our longtime friend of the show from way back when, prolific author, and I think if you're into AD&D, he has some really good campaign or rules packs, whatever purveyors of that particular role-playing system enjoy. So check those out as well.
Awesome. I did not even connect to that.
Yeah, I think he sent a message at some point saying, "By the way, I'm Paul Leone," or something. So
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Stargate, including Alexander S., Andrew G., Lawrence V., Philip D., and Gregory N. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and you can find the video versions at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. To find previous episodes of Secrets of Stargate and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate. And you can email us at stargate@sqpn.com and follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on X at SQPN. And be sure to check out the SQPN Discord channel at sqpn.com/Discord. And we'll be back next time with the next episode of Atlantis Condemned. Until then, Jeff Haecker, thank you for joining us and sharing the Secrets of Stargate.
Thanks, Jack.
And Lisa Jones, thank you as well.
Thanks, Jack.
And Victor Lambs, thank you too.
Thanks, Jack. And I have pillaged the galaxy many times over and made slaves of all the mortals I have encountered. This world pleases me and I shall take it as my own.
Sounds like you've been busy.
Yes.
And once again, I'm Jack Baruzzini. Thank you for listening to Secrets of Stargate on StarQuest.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?